I think the first thing to recognise is that the skills that our teachers and learners are going to need for the 21st century aren't necessarily different. Many of those skills run in parallel, and they're to meet the core challenge of the 21st century. And incidentally, I don't think we're just talking about the 21st century anymore. If you think about it, it's a very sobering thought to think that children who will be born in the next few years, or indeed many who have already been born, because of the progresses in things like medicine, will actually be living in the 22nd century. So we're looking even further ahead in terms of what that means. But the challenge is the same, and the core to that challenge is the ability to master change, to live comfortably in what is going to be an increasingly uncertain world. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, the rate at which the world is changing socially, economically, technologically is exponential. The world is changing at a phenomenal rate. You know, who would have ever forecast 10 or 15 years ago that the digital revolution would have had the effect on our lives that it's had? So the core for me is that ability to live in a world of change and uncertainty. And of course, when you unpick what that means in terms of skill sets, it's a very different skill set to the skill sets that we as teachers, our own generations, our parents' generations, our grandparents' generations needed, where the world, although it was changing, was far more certain in many aspects, particularly the world of employment, the fact that we didn't travel as much as we do now, that technology didn't mean communication was as easy. So our lives were much more static. So we were educated for worlds of certainty, you know, the traditional route. Work really hard at school, pass your exams, go to university, get a great degree, find a big company, work well in that big company, you've got a job for life and a pension that'll see you through your old age. And of course, what we know is those things don't exist. Now, of course, for our students, that means they're going to have to be more resilient, self-confident, independent, creative, innovative, curious. They're going to have to be able to take risks. They're going to have to lead lives that have no certainty attached to them. In order for our students to live that way, we need our teachers, I think, not just to teach those skills and competencies, but they have to understand them inside too. And I think that in many ways is the greatest challenge. You know, for a number of years now, we've talked at length about teaching our students how to be more creative, how to be more resilient, how to be more flexible. But actually what we've never done is taken a step back and said, but hold on a minute. Do our teachers know what it means to be self-confident, resilient, risk-taking, innovative and creative? And I suppose in many ways the answer to all of this, from my passion, lies in a different kind of question, which is when we're born with all of the critical skills we need to be successful citizens in the 21st and 22nd century. We are born creative, innovative. We're born risk takers. We're born with unbelievably inquiring minds. You know, there are many experts out there that tell us we learn somewhere between 75 to 80% of everything we learn in our lifetime before we're 5 years of age. So we possess those skills. We possess those natural aptitudes. So in many ways, I'd like to finish this particular remark by spinning it on its head. And rather than saying what kind of skills and competencies do we need our young people to be taught to have in the future, we should be saying, how do we ensure that we embellish what they already possess? And what does the existing system do to hamper those natural abilities? And maybe then the question for our teachers is to reframe the learning model so that we build on what children already have, rather than assuming that they're blank canvases that need filling with everything. I think that's a great question. How teachers can acquire the skills necessary is one of the great challenges. You know, first of all, and not to decry my own profession, we're a peculiar species, I think, generally speaking, teachers. We tend to be very small c conservative. We're not great at change. Because of the pressures that are on the teaching profession in so many regards and from so many directions, we tend to protect ourselves by getting ourselves into routines, by being comfortable in the familiar, in the things that we're used to. And so to ask the teaching profession to think dramatically differently about the paradigm of education, I think is quite a long-term challenge. But there are a number of things we do need to do. And I think that begins with two particular areas. The first is teacher training and teacher recruitment. We need to find a way to encourage more enterprising, more entrepreneurial thinkers into the teaching profession. We need to make it an attractive place for the visionaries to be, for the people that want to create and discover and innovate. So we need to attract really fresh, exciting minds into the teaching profession. We then need to make sure that all of our teacher training centres around the world are nurturing those abilities, so that what we're doing through teacher training is encouraging our students to live a life of action research, to constantly question, to constantly explore, to constantly challenge their own practice, to draw experiences from a range of different sources and backgrounds, which leads me in parallel to the second part of this answer, which is how do we deal with the teachers currently in post? But this links back into teacher training. Because part of it for me is ensuring we expose teachers and training teachers to the world outside of education. You know, education, again, by its nature, tends to be a very insular environment. And one of the things I've learned in the years that I've been out of school now, I've had the great privilege to travel around the world and meet people from very diverse backgrounds, inside and outside of education. And I know that in the last 5 years, I have learned more that would lend itself to make me a far more dynamic and exciting teacher than I was prior to this journey, purely because I've been exposed to things that I would never normally have been exposed to. So with, for example, professional development programs, I think we need to look differently, and rather than saying we should just send our teachers out on courses to become better math teachers or better science teachers or better art teachers, we should be linking up and collaborating more with people outside of education and ensuring our teachers get the opportunity to spend time in business environments, in social and charitable environments, in a range of different areas, so that we can truly stimulate their imagination, their curiosity, and their questioning, and therefore start to replicate the kind of skills we need from our students, but in a way that hopefully will have a profound impact on their own professional practice. In order to acquire the kind of skills we're looking for, I think we need to be very careful about how we design and manage our education systems. For too many years, progress and true evolution of education has constantly hit the buffers because we're still demanding that our schools and our system are measured in the same ways that they were 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And there's been consternation throughout the world as to why, despite the investment and input into trying to find more creative and innovative approaches to education, so little movement seems to have been made. And I often use the analogy that it's a bit like turning around to a famous chef and saying to a famous chef, please use any ingredients you want to create something new, but what you have to create is this cheesecake. And in a way, we're hampered in that way so that we have a profession who are still measured in very traditional ways, who are under more and more pressure to achieve those very traditional outcomes, but at the same time are being asked to act, behave and work differently. You know, I think e-learning is a terrific example of that, that there is so much potential with e-learning, with digital technologies, that the horizons are limitless, you know, where we could go and what we could do beyond possibly human imagination as it currently stands. However, the minute you give a teacher a tablet or a wireless classroom or an interactive whiteboard, their first instinct is, how can I use this to meet the results I've always had to meet? And so what you immediately do is create horrendous limitation on process and progress. What we need to do is take a step back from accountability and allow time for innovation and new paradigm to be created in education, and then rightly to ask the question, now how do we assess the performance and process and progress within what we're doing? But if all we do is say to the education profession that this is what you've always got to hit, but down here somewhere you can do it in different ways, I think we're limiting our own potential. And so what we need, I think, is to give our profession more confidence, to feel freer, to explore, to innovate, to create, to harness the kind of skills we're talking about needing to develop in our students and our teachers, so that we are capable of producing citizens for the 22nd century.